Pump up the jams on a Sunday Not So Casual Free Friday. It is Friday, September 1st, 2023. It is CFB Knowledge for College, the Shark and the Gun, coming right back at you. Happy hour on a Friday. Hope everybody's dominating their life. We open up September with numerous top plays. CFB Knowledge for College, Sharky Waters Nation on YouTube, and the new X, otherwise known retroactively as Twitter. Guns picks. I'm hyped. A lot to discuss. What's going on tonight, my brother?
Are we even going to talk about how electric we were yesterday as a group? The collabs are working, and when the Gun and the Shark are on the same side, we just sweep the board. 3 for 3, baby. We gave you 3 picks. We gave you 3 winners. And guess what? We're going to just bring the fire, bring the heat. It is going to be an absolutely electric football Saturday. I'm ready to get this fired up. Let's get it going, baby.
Not waiting around on a suddenly not so casual Free Friday into Send It Saturday, September 2nd. It will be. We know a lot of people are gambling tonight. We take this at the highest level of professionalism. We got nothing tonight, guys. We're not betting this absolute crapshoot of a board. We send you the best of luck, but we are going straight business, high noon, Big 12 football. Deion Sanders in his first game in FBS as a head coach, Amon G. Carter Stadium, Fort Worth, Texas. TCU, a heavy number for a reason. The Guns picked. First official of the broadcast.
I got to give it up to Detroit. He goes, Gun, what kind of bourbon you drinking tonight? Man, I ain't drinking right now, but I think I'm going to be cracking a little bit of the Woodford a little bit later while we're watching some of these games on the Friday. But I don't have any money on it, so it's a little bit relaxing for this casual Friday. But let's talk about this TCU game here. I like TCU minus 20.5 in this spot. Let me tell you why. Listen, Colorado coming off 1-11 season, firing the coach, getting Deion. We all know the business. He comes over from Jackson State, and all of a sudden there's a mass exodus from everybody on the Colorado Buffalo team. 6 offense return, 3 on the defensive side. So he basically has to go to the transfer portal and grab everybody who is willing and able to go play for prime time. Now you got TCU. They're coming off the best season in the school's history, getting to the national championship game, going 13-2. But, you know, the talent, basically a lot of them gone, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You got 3 offensive returning starters for them, 7 on the defensive side. But TCU did lose Max Duggan. They did lose their top wide receiver. They lost their running back. I get that. But Chandler Morris is coming back. Need not fret here, folks. He was the starting quarterback before Max Duggan, but he got hurt, and then Max took off and led the team. No room for him, but this year is going to be Chandler Morris's year. Also, they lose their running back. I did talk about them, but they got a solid transfer from Alabama, Trey Sanders. You're going to see this guy absolutely lighten up the field for TCU, and they go to the wide receiver quorum, get a bunch of P5 transfers, so they're reloaded offensively and ready to go. Now on the TCU defensive side, virtually intact, especially the secondary and the linebacker positions. This will be key going against a Colorado team that's going to want to pass the ball, because the OC for Colorado is former head coach Sean Lewis. He likes to run a high-paced, high-octane, pass-oriented offense, and this kind of plays into the strength of the TCU defense. Plus, there's just a lot of hype with Deion right now. This is the time we just got to be fading Colorado from moving forward until we see something from them. He's got a lot of parts and pieces into this new offense and new defense. This is just a rebuilding year. It's going to take time for this program to grow. And there's a reason why this line is sitting here at minus 20.5. Last year, TCU was favored were 14-point road favorites versus Colorado. They won 38-18 with a much better team, obviously. And now they're minus 20.5 at home. Come on, man. This is going to be a tough one here for prime time on the road at TCU. Sans national championship when they got their butts kicked by Georgia. I think they're going to want to prove something out here in game 1. Give me TCU minus 20.5, 2 units special.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm not unofficially. I personally try to avoid the noon games just for my mental health, because if the game starts so early, I'm getting up a little later as an entrepreneur. It's tough for me to sweat it, but Guns is on to something here without question. I think there's a lot of hype with Deion Sanders, obviously coming over here from Jackson State, obviously working for Barstool Sports, obviously a legend in all facets of professional and college football dating back to the 80s. But I do think that hype point really is something that people are buying a little bit too much into. This is a program that absolutely bottomed out last year in this conference. And this is a team that really has very little upside coming into this season. And as Guns mentioned, this line is heavily on TCU for a reason. TCU team obviously ran an elite campaign last year. Chandler Morris really should take them up another notch. And I think also the total is telling you a northward story of what was a low-scoring dud last year in Boulder. Personally, if I was playing this, I would lean towards the over. Guns picks on the side for 2 units official. My first top play of the broadcast on this beautiful Friday night leading into Saturday morning. We're taking it over in Colorado, Fort Collins, between Colorado State and Washington State, better known as Wazoo football, Pac-12, traveling over here to the Mountain West. Over 54.5, 1 unit official. This truly is a great spot. And I started going through it, and my eyes lit up in every way they could possibly light up. And I went through this for close to an hour, so I got a lot of details. Let's talk about it. Go back to last year. Washington State on the road, very polarized in their ability to score the football. They did have 3 unders at Wisconsin out of conference, at USC in conference, and at Oregon State in conference. But again, let's analyze. At Wisconsin, Big Ten, slow down, leatherhead football. At USC, real pro-style, fast-paced, electric defensive style of game there. And at Corvallis, which is just a death zone travel spot there, they averaged 13.7 points per game in those 3 ball games. But go to the other side of their calendar, at Stanford and at Arizona, far less quality, far less defensive quality, 41.5 points per game in those games. Go to the Colorado State side of this game. Colorado State last year was 0-6 at home against the over. And this is where it's an incredible buy spot off this intense clustered over last year. Because if you really go to the box scores of those games, just about every single one of them was a complete, utter anomaly statistically. Let's go through them for a brief second. 2 out-of-conference games early season against Middle Tennessee State and Sacramento State. Those were higher scoring games, 34-19 and 41-10. Both were unders on 58.5, 59.5. Here's the key point in those games, though. 626 yards, 648 yards, 6 turnovers against Middle Tennessee State. The game should have gone over by about 20 points. Then you come back into conference, 4 absolute dud games against Utah State, Hawaii, Wyoming, and New Mexico. Only 26 points per game in those finals, with yardage totals of 652, 643, 608, and 438. This is absolutely statistically in an anomaly point. And go back to last year. Colorado State did play a road game at Washington State. The game did finish 38-7. That is 45 points. It went under a 52.5 number. Crucial point, what we love to look at here is off of an under last year at 52.5, books moved this up to 57.5. And this is really interesting stuff if you go to that game. As I mentioned, all these unders for Colorado State last year at home, just so many yards and no points. That game was the same story. 691 total yards in the game. Colorado State actually had 5 more minutes of possession in the game and somehow got outscored by 31. That's very hard to do. And if you really start to go through what happened, I'll try to speed this up, guys. I know we don't want to talk about this game forever, but 5 out of their first 6 possessions, missed field goal, stall in plus territory, 4 and out in plus territory, interception, and then another 4 and out, downs at midfield, another interception, 4 and out at the 20-yard line. And if you really go through it, I have written down here, outrageous, because it was. And if you go through the actual psychology of the group, last year, Jay Norvell came over here from Nevada. This guy ran a high-paced, efficient offense with Nevada for 4 years. Go back to 2021, his last season with Nevada. That team averaged 44.2 points per game at home. Last year, he truly just fell trap to a freshman quarterback, Clay Millen, underachieving. And I think, again, underachieving in an outlierish way. This kid had a 72.2 completion percentage, which was a Colorado State program record, yet could not get in the end zone. 5 TDs in 23 trips, lowest percentage in the conference. And I'll leave you with this quote from our guy, Clay Millen. I'm not a young guy anymore. No more freshman mistakes. I've got to play like an older guy now. Time to turn up the points. Points on both sides of this game. Numbers and narratives. My top official of the early card here, over 54.5, 1 unit. Guns picks, comments on the side.
Yeah, I actually like the side on this one. I got it at plus 11. It is getting steamed down. I saw some 10s and 10.5s right now. Still good above the 10, I think. You got to look at these two teams as how they finished the season. All right, Colorado State's trying to figure things out on the back half of the season. You actually look at these numbers, and Shark kind of alluded to the yards that Colorado State was putting up here. I mean, they finished strong, plus 76 net yard average, minus 2 point differential. You don't really see that with numbers like that. They were absolutely dominated. But you look at the Washington State, they struggled in the last 4 games of the season. They only beat Arizona State, and then they got dominated by Washington, then Fresno State in their bowl game. They finished with a minus 5 point differential, minus 163 net yard average in those games. A lot of alluding to the total again, there's a lot of changes here with the offense for Washington State. They're going with a little bit more pass heavy oriented offense. They're bringing in OC Ben Arbuckle from Western Kentucky. So he's going to kind of adjust the fly and the less conservative offense that Washington State does bring to the table here. But with this Colorado State team, they just perform well at home. Jay Norville's teams excel as home dogs. 9-3 against the spread in those situations. 2-1 against the spread as the Colorado State head coach. But I'm just looking at this as a good spot for Colorado State. They finished the last year strong. They should carry over this season. They should score points. I don't think this is going to be one of those years that they do the same thing as last year. They got a lot of returning talent. It's also a revenge factor. They did get beat by Washington State last season. And I just can't get off of Colorado State in this spot here. So I'm going to be taking Colorado State plus 11 to unit special.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And we've talked about this across numerous sports for the last 5 years here on Sharky Waters Nation. We appreciate you guys joining us. Happy Hour special, Friday, September 1st. And truthfully, when you find a team side and a total in the same game, it usually does correlate to itself. And as Guns mentioned, buying the ATS side of Colorado State absolutely correlates to them improving immensely off a 7-point outcome last year out of conference on the road. 2 officials, 1 game. Let's move on. Next play, we're going to Denton, Texas, North Texas, the Mean Green at home, hosting out of conference Cal Berkeley. The green hat is on. An opportunity to dominate. Guns picks taking the home team at plus 6.5.
This ain't a fashion statement, folks. That's the reason why I'm putting on the North Texas hat, bent brim and all. I like North Texas in this spot. They are one of my favorite teams to take when they're playing at home, especially as a dog. When you break this team down, they had a 7-7 year, lasted 2022. They did fire their longtime head coach in Seth Luttrell, but they replaced him with former Incarnate Word head coach and he was former Washington State's OC, Eric Morris. They also bring back 15 returning starters. One of those starters, however, is not going to be Austin Ani. I always get that name wrong. But anyways, so they bring in a season transfer, ULM transfer, Chandler Rogers. He's going to be taking over the offense. Not really the statistics that Austin brought to the table, but I think it's going to be sufficient enough to get that offense going. Now, you look at the Cal side. They do lose their QB from last year, Jack Plummer. He does go to the transfer portal. He is in the Big Ten, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So they go to TCU transfer Sam Jackson, and I'm not talking about Samuel Jackson, not going in that direction. But he's athletic. He's got a lot of good attributes. He does have talent, but he has no playing experience. He's not anybody I'm willing to back until I see him play a little bit. But you got to look at Cal. They just underperform when it comes to playing on the road. They have a minus 13-point differential last season, minus 77 net yard average. They're 1-6 against the spread and is away favorite. So that's a key point on that one too. But when you look at North Texas, I'm losing my notes here. So basically, it's just Cal. To put it clearly, North Texas last season when they play at home, plus 12-point differential, plus 87 net yard average last season. Cal is adjusting to a new quarterback. They're adjusting to a new offensive coordinator as well that's coming over from Texas State. And you just have Cal that just underperforms on the road. Cal is also in a tough spot because they have a home game next week against Auburn. So there may be a little bit of a look ahead there, but I'm not putting that all into my cap. I'm just taking the fact that North Texas is dominant at home versus a bad road team in Cal. So give me North Texas here, plus 6.5, 2-unit special.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that is great statistically to make the conversational point. Cal traveling out of conference, really, what is a trap game? We saw it last night in certain environments, and people oftentimes will say week one's not a trap. Maybe not so much in other sports. In college football, absolutely. When you have your home opener against SEC Auburn in the next game, there will be a look ahead element here. I think Gun's onto something. Plus 6.5 for the Gun. Staying in Texas, this time going to College Station. A really interesting total here where you find Texas A&M laying 38.5 points to a really, really poor University of New Mexico. However, the intrigue point comes in that the total is only 48.5, 49. So a team's laying 38.5 points and the total's only 49. They're basically telling us a direct score. Guns picks. What's going on here?
Listen, Jimbo Fisher is going to come out here red hot this season, especially bringing back 20 returning starters. Okay, this team finished 5-7. They underperformed in a lot of cases. They had a lot of situations. They had to deal with a lot of key injuries, especially at the quarterback position. But everybody's healthy. They got guys going, and I think this is going to be a great year for Texas A&M. But we talk about New Mexico, on the other hand, 2-10 last season, 2-8 against the spread as a road dog in the last two seasons, and only 10 returning starters. But when you look at this game and you see the line at minus 38, minus 38.5, and you see in the over and under at 48.5, 49, it looks like it's going down on the downward. That should tell you that you're basically looking at an A&M team, and you have to say to yourself, can you score that many points? Because New Mexico is not going to be able to do it. If you actually look at their stats in 2022, on the road last season, they averaged 7 points per game, only scoring more than 10 once. And that was against UNLV. UNLV is not a good team here, folks. Everybody else, they scored under 10 points. Now, A&M did have their struggle scoring points last season. Like I said, bevy of issues. Only had 25 points per game at home and 21 points per game versus non-conference opponents. So even when they play the worst of the worst, or the best of the best in non-conference play, they don't really put up more points than above their average here, folks. Now you have we talked about the A&M transition. When we talk about the defense, there is just a lot of talent on this defensive side. Remember, Jimbo Fisher went on the recruiting trail probably 2 years ago, and he picked up every single defensive lineman on the planet. I mean, top 10, top 5 elite guys, and now they're in their second year, okay? They really had an outstanding year for a bunch of freshmen. They all had to play. They all had the experience. Now they're sophomores, stronger, wiser, and they have a bevy of stars here, folks. Now you got to look at New Mexico's offense, only averaging 229 points per game, and they allowed 43 sacks. So I suspect this team is going to get, they're going to get to the line, and they're going to have to go against probably the best defensive line in the country, and they're going to get absolutely rocked by this A&M defense here. So A&M should dominate. They have a big game next week versus Miami, so that kind of puts a key point here in the total because I don't think a lot of these starters are going to play the whole entire game, especially if they go up big. And New Mexico is just not going to be able to stay with them putting up the points based on their history. So that's why I'm going to be taking the under here. I got it at 49.5. I like it at 48, 47. I just think this is going to be one of those games that it's going to be low scoring and the points are only going to come from one side, and it's going to be the A&M side. So give me the under here, 49.5, 2-unit special.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you. And just want to make one comment on this. As I said, I think this speaks to really a direct score. I would be shocked if the score was not 45-3 in this game. I really think this is going to be a tight window game where they're basically covering both by inside of a couple points. I think 45-3 is the template, and that's what we might see there. So if you guys want to place an exact score bet, I'm not sure the exact odds there. Of course, put like $5 on it for fun. I think 45-3 is probably the spot there. And flipping to a much more competitive environment, next play, the only collaboration play of the broadcast. Of course, we did sweep collaboration plays last night. 3-0. We appreciate you guys riding the wave and dominating with us as we begin this upward journey through the fall of 2023. And speaking of a continued upward journey, the UTSA Roadrunners, Frank Harris, campaign for a senior. And our official play is very much centered around that. I'm taking UTSA at -118 money line, 1 unit. Let's talk about it in more detail. Last year, on September 3rd, 2022, Houston had the exact advantage that UTSA has this year, which was super senior quarterback Clayton Tune on their roster. This guy is now on the Arizona Cardinals, which opens up a can of worms and an opportunity to take Houston. Go back to that game. Take UTSA. Go back to that game last year. Houston did win the game in triple overtime, 37-35. But if you really start to go through the box score, they got very, very fortunate. UTSA was up in that game 21-7 after the third quarter. They really had the handcuffs on Houston and Clayton Tune. They did outgain them in the game by almost 100 yards, 441-346. Ultimately, when you're up by that margin going into the fourth quarter and crucial point, you are dominating the yards gained. You should finish the job. And really, an inopportunistic turnover opened up a backdoor opportunity for Houston there last year. If you really go through the numbers of this too, this is heavy, heavy stuff for UTSA. That particular game, Houston on the road was laying -4.5. They should come home and lay 7.5, 8, or 9. They opened up at -2. A lot of sharp steam coming in on UTSA as well. This is really an all boxes check spot. Final point before I throw it to the gun. UTSA last year was very good on the road ATS. They were 4-2. And I think if you really hone into why they didn't cover those 2 ball games, it was very much not this environment. They were a significant underdog at the University of Texas, and they got hammered 41-20. And they were laying a gigantic 34.5 figure at Florida Atlantic. Did not cover that. Significant dog, significant favorite. This is not even close to that. This will be a UTSA revenge win. Numbers and narratives on the money line. -118, 1 unit. Guns picks, alignment, I believe.
Yeah, you mentioned it there. This is a big revenge game, but I'm gonna make sure I give proper shout outs to the chat here, as sharp picks would say here. Razor sharp picks, I should say. Ross Pitts, Bob the Candyman Can, Jeff Emerald, Detroit Gator, Tom Leach, 29 in the chat, and of course, Mean JMC. Love you guys and keep it up, man. And tell me what you're drinking, tell me what you're smoking, tell me what plays you're on, and get this chat live in here. But let's talk about this UTSA and Houston game for a second. UTSA coming off an 11-3 season despite losing key weapons in the 2021 season. Trailer had those guys cooking. It was very impressive, especially losing Sincere McCormick. But they bring back this year more starters, 16 returning starters, 8 on the offensive side, 8 on the defensive side. Houston, on the other hand, they lost a bevy of weapons. They lost their longtime QB and top rusher Clayton Tune. They lost their top 2 receivers, including Tank Dell, who had almost 1,400 yards receiving last season. And they only bring back 3 starters on the offensive line. So this is a complete reset button here for Houston. Plus, you have UTSA coming into this game, and they have Frank Harris back. I think Frank Harris might be my age, okay? He's been there forever. He's been that quarterback, that rock for that team. So they are in good hands with him. And then you have Kavarian Barnes, who had an electric year last season, 845 yards, 6.3 yards per carry. And they get 4 out of their top 5 wide receivers, included Josh Cephas, who had almost 1,000 yards last season. He's going to have a big year because the top receiver did go to the transfer portal, but he's going to be the guy. They are in good hands there. Now, last season, we talked about it, 37-35, 3 OTs as 4-point favorites. Now you see the opposite here with UTSA as a favorite at -1.5 or money line that you can get at -118. I don't know what the juice is at this point, but it's huge revenge factor here for UTSA. So you basically just have this Houston team transition in. Of course, they're in the Big 12 now, so they're transitioning to the bigger conference. They lose all their weapons that made them successful, and they're facing a strong G5 team that is moving up to the AAC this season with a ton of returning talent. I'm telling you, UTSA is going to want this game bad for what happened last season. So give me UTSA. It is a collab play, baby, and it's 2 units for me. But you know how we do it. 3-0 yesterday. Let's make it 4-0.
Yeah, and one closing remark on that game. Guns just brought it up. I had been meaning to say this, but I talked about this yesterday in terms of the opening game being a revenge game from last year. Part of the reason we don't have any plays tonight is because most of these teams purely have not played each other in a long time. And that is actually symptomatic of tomorrow's card as well. Obviously, week 1 Saturday, you got, 50 games or something like that. It just so happens with the new scheduling of FBS football, a lot of these teams purely have not played each other in recent history. This is one of the ones that you absolutely want to hone into. This might as well be week 8. Like, that's how unbelievably detailed the analysis can be here, motivationally speaking. And as I said it yesterday, when you have a game that you lost in triple overtime in your home stadium in really egregious fashion, a Clayton Tune walk-off 2-point conversion in the third overtime, this is what you talk about all mini camp, off-season, recruiting, training camp. They've had this circled on the calendar just like Utah did yesterday. I think this could be a hammer spot on the road. And again, the line is indicating it. And we want to give a shout to the chat. Beautiful people in the chat, incredibly sharp minds. I want to give a shout out to my guy Ross Pitt says home dog is going to cover. I will say this, conversation always wins. Home dogs are not all created equally. UConn yesterday was the accessible home dog. This is a very public home dog where people are saying Houston wins a lot. Now they're an underdog. We get value. Value is not true value if it is the opposite of the law of averages expectancy. So just a conversational point there. We love this play. Top collaboration play, week 1 Saturday, UTSA minus 118 and minus 1.5. Final play on Saturday, going back to the gun. USA, I say this every time, not the country, South Alabama, Sunbelt, traveling on the road to the Tulane Green Wave. Tulane running an absolutely elite clean sheet campaign last year for them. South Alabama, an absolute bye team coming up off momentum last year. Guns picks, final official of Saturday. Don't leave just yet, guys. We have an official on Sunday after this. Guns picks, plus 6.5, 1 unit.
Yeah, listen, you have Tulane just having a banner year, right? That 12-2 season, big bowl win for USC, and one of the best bowl games of the year, in my opinion. I mean, it was absolutely electric. Emotions are very high for this team coming out of this season, but they have 14 returning starters, so they lose a lot here on the offense, especially 6 offense come back, 8 on the defensive side. South Alabama, on the other hand, bringing back almost everybody. They're bringing back a ton of experience. They're coming off an impressive season themselves. 10-3 season, 18 returning starters back, including starting quarterback Carter Bradley, top running back LaDamian Webb, and their top 2 wide receivers last season. So they're bringing back a lot of talent. So you got a lot of experience there. Now you got to look at the offensive line, which is very key here for South Alabama. 4 starters are back on that offensive line, and they brought in a few transfers to kind of fill in the voids, fill in the depth. So they're going to be very strong on the offensive line, probably one of the strongest offensive lines in their conference. Now you got Tulane, like I said, 6 starters back. They get Michael Pratt back. They're starting QB, but they lose the biggest part of their offense here. Tajay Spears is not going to be back for this team. This kid had over 1,500 yards of rushing offense last season. And if you saw him in that USC game, he was so dominant and he was so key and vital to the success of Tulane. Their O-line is strong, but they're losing big weapons. That big weapon will hurt them, okay? Now you have South Alabama. They're a balanced offense, so they can run the ball, they can pass the ball. Should continue to do that, especially with the downgraded offense here for Tulane. Last time Tulane had and here's a key stat here. Last time Tulane had double-digit wins was 1998. Okay, they were 12-0. The next season they go 3-8. So it's night and day between these two teams. Plus, you have to know where Tulane came from. They had a terrible record coming into last season, and they have one of the best records they've ever had. So I think there's going to be some regression here for this Tulane team. It's just a pure fade of Tulane in this spot. coming off the major bowl win, highest of highs. They lose their best offensive weapon, top 2 wide receivers as well, and their top 5 tacklers on the defensive side. So that's why I'm going to be taking South Alabama. Go with the experience here, fully loaded. South Alabama plus 6.5, 2-unit play for me.
Love it. An opportunity to dominate. Final play. It will be Sunday. Sundays are for the Sharps. This is not just a Sunday play. This is one of my top 3 plays this week. We are going straight back to an environment we capped correctly last year. This showcase game, SEC, ACC, LSU, FSU at Camping World Stadium in Orlando on Sunday night. ABC Sports, 7:30 p.m. I am excited for it, and we're taking the over 55.5, 1-unit official. Go back to last year's game. Great template to analyze. Game last year finished 24-23. The line in that game was 51.5. Guess what, guys? Under 51.5, 24-23. Very next season, 57.5. They're telling you a story here. And when you go through that box score, that game really, really was what seems to be a theme of this broadcast. An outlier, an anomaly, whatever statistical term you want to use to describe it. That game started out real slow, 7-3 at the half, and it really picked up in the second half, 20-17 in the second half. I think that's where we're going to pick up this year off of that second half pace. The teams did score 5 touchdowns in their last 7 possessions. And crucial point, the 7-3 first half was not just a defensive battle. It was mistakes on offense. There were 740 total yards in the game. That game should have gone over based on the yardage distribution quite easily. And that's why the books are moving the line up. They're telling you what happened last year was not indicative of this year's matchup. Go back to last year, Florida State on the road. They were a juggernaut. And crucial point, as I suggested, the momentum picked up in the second half of that game. They picked up in the second half of the season offensively, 33.75 points per game on the road last year. And you look at LSU. LSU had 4 isolated road games other than the game against FSU, which was a neutral site game in the opening weekend. They did go 2-2 versus the over. But I think very importantly, if we look at those 4 ball games within the SEC, they did go 2-1 versus the over in prime time. One of those unders was a dud game in Arkansas at 12 noon in November, and the other under was at Auburn. The 2 overs, I think, are very similar to this, and I think environmentally similar as well. On October 15th last year, they did go over with significance in Gainesville. Obviously, Gainesville is not Camping World. The Gators are not the Noles. But again, environmentally, for this team traveling to central North Florida, outdoors at night, 45-35 over. I think we could see a similar style game to that. And the other one, another primetime game on November 26th at Jimbo Fisher and the boys, 38-23, another over. This is going to be points early and often. This should be a very entertaining game to watch. I also think this is a very agreeable bet. I do not bet for agreeability, but sometimes they just happen to be agreeable. On Sunday night, everybody's off on Monday. This is really the last entertaining game of that card. Take an over, watch the teams battle, and don't necessarily sweat aside. As you saw last year, it came down to a blocked PAT to cover Florida State plus 2.5. We're on it at 55.5. That is a -115 line on FanDuel, an official from the Shark. Guns picks, comments on this game. I know you potentially like a side. I think you're still working on it, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm still working through everything. I mean, if I had to take a side right now today, as it stands, and don't quote me on this one, it's not official yet, but it may be official before kickoff on Sunday. I'm leaning on the FSU side. I think that's the only angle I will take on this one. And I know how things finished in that game, but the angle is I think Florida State really had control of that game and kind of let their foot off the gas pedal or the neck proverbial neck of LSU and kind of let the game fall out of their hands. This team's a little bit more experienced, a little bit wiser this year, playing in a different condition that is more suited for their type of play. I do agree with the angle there. I think there's going to be some key missing defensive players, especially top linebacker there for LSU due to suspension. So that kind of plays into the total as well. But if I'm gonna take a side on this one, it's probably going to be the FSU side. I'm not official yet, but I'm almost there.
Yeah, no, and I honestly was looking for a side here as well. Of course, you get the LSU revenge game. You get the same line, so books are not telling you necessarily LSU strength here. They would move it up from 2.5 to 3.5 if they were indicating LSU was supposed to cover. The game's going to be tight, no doubt, and I think again that's very agreeable for the over. Just a lot of back and forth points on Sunday night. Mm-hmm. That's a wrap for the broadcast. We got 8 top plays, 1 collaboration play. My 3 plays: Wazoo on the road in Fort Collins, Colorado State, upward movement, second campaign, Jay Norvell, and the quarterback Millen over 54.5. Collaboration play, Texas, San Antonio. Let's get it done this time. Frank Harris, the senior, Clayton Tune in the NFL. Money line, 1.5. And as I mentioned, Sunday night in Camping World Stadium, LSU, Florida State over 55.5. Guns picks early high noon special Big 12 football. TCU continuing momentum against Deion Sanders in his first FBS game, minus 20.5. North Texas at home catching Cal Berkeley in a really tough travel spot, plus 6.5. Under 49.5. Texas A&M, New Mexico, and South Alabama fading Tulane off a very, very unsustainable high 11-2 campaign. Beautiful Friday it is, September 1st, 2023. Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. It is the Shark and the Gun, CFB Knowledge for College. We appreciate you guys immensely for interacting with the show. 40 minutes in the books, a season for championship quality only. Sending you guys all the best vibes. Have a great night. Whatever you're doing, we see you, we back you, we love you, and we respect you. Guns picks, close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, I know you guys are watching simulcast here, whether it be Twitter or YouTube. 37 to 40 of you beautiful bastards have joined us live and watch this show. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe on the Sharky Waters Nation channel, please do so, because that's where the shows are going to be moving forward. Live content. It's going to be an absolutely electric year. We're going to win a ton of money here. And shout out to the chat for joining us here. And Detroit Gator said it best. Time for some Woodford for the boy. I may have to crack one here and give it a little pour with some ice. Neat, as always. But I'm going to be doing a show tomorrow, probably 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And it's basically a live chat, man. If you were part of it last year, it's college football. You give the questions, I give the answers. That's all I do. You just fire away at me. It's not my turn to fire the shots. It's your turn to fire the shot. So join me live. I will let you know, and I'll put the link out there so everybody can draw. I will do it live on YouTube and Twitter, but the comments will have to come through Twitter. But YouTube. Thanks for joining us this time for Shark and the Gun Week 1. NFL's going to be coming up soon. Let's cash some tickets. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang. Yeah.